Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. 2 years ago, listeners may recall Major League Baseball pulled its All-Star game from Atlanta, Georgia in protest of the state's new voting law, which tightened some rules, particularly around mail balloting after the 2020 election. But last week, Major League Baseball announced that the 2025 All-Star Game will be returning to Atlanta, Georgia. Here is Commissioner Rob Manfred explaining the decision.
I made a decision in 2021 to move the event, and I understand, believe me, that people had then and probably still have different views as to the merits of that decision. What's most important is that the Atlanta Braves are a great organization. Truist Park and the Battery are gems in terms of the facilities, and Atlanta and Georgia has been a great markets for us for a very, very long time.
Kim, that wasn't exactly an apology, but should the state of Georgia take it as an apology, or is maybe that the closest that they're going to get?
Yeah, I think what Mr. Manfred meant to say is what's really important is that he was very, very wrong, as was obviously proven by Georgia setting and turnout records for the midterm election in 2022, completely demolishing any claims that this law in any way led to voter suppression. I went back and looked at his sort of sanctimonious quote back at the time explaining that the need to move the game was the best way to demonstrate our values as a sport. And don't forget that MLB was not the only outfit out there that was doing this. You had Ed Bastia, the CEO of Delta, James Quincy, the CEO of Coca-Cola, both saying that this law was unacceptable. Arthur Blank, the owner of the Atlanta Falcons, also complaining and condemning the law. Mr. Manfred particularly owes an apology because this was more than just a simple slap in the face to Georgia. And to Atlanta, it cost, by some estimates, about $100 million in lost economic activity at a really hard time for the state as well, too, given everyone was dealing with the aftermath of COVID. And so, this is something that I think he ought to apologize for and apologize for profusely and many times over.
I think it bears noting the 2022 Georgia election was won. The runoff was won by Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock with 51.4% of the vote to Herschel Walker's 48.6% of the vote. Alicia, part of what I think makes this story so interesting is it raises whether CEOs inside professional sports and far outside professional sports have learned any lessons in recent years about jumping on these political bandwagons. I mean, what does Major League Baseball have to do with the voting laws in the states that it is holding events in? But for that matter, what does Coca-Cola, which also took a position, as I recall, on the voting law, what does Coca-Cola have to do with voting laws? And what do any of these big companies that sell consumer products have to do with the laws that are being passed in the states where they operate? And yet it seems in recent years it has not dissuaded those CEOs from taking positions that are polarizing to the public and to their own consumers.
Right. So actually, in particular respects to the Georgia law, if you recall in 2021, there's this Yale business school professor, Jeffrey Sonnenfeld, who actually helped orchestrate this campaign against the Georgia law. And he actually held a meeting with all these CEOs. And I presume Mr. Manfred too, and tried to convince them that it was in their interest to take a position against supposedly this law that supposedly disenfranchised minority groups. Again, this was very misleading. Actually, the law they passed had many fewer restrictions on voting than laws in, say, New York. But in any case, so this Yale business school professor did convince a lot of CEOs that taking a position would improve their standing among their workers and among the public at large, including consumers. Now, with the MLB in particular, what's interesting, I find, is that, MLB has been having declining viewership for a number of years, and partly because young people just aren't watching baseball anymore. And so I think part of what he was trying to shore up some of his audience maybe tried to boost interest among maybe some woke progressives in watching baseball. I think that's really kind of a ridiculous idea, but I think the MLB has been having problems. And the World Series viewership has continued to decline since 2016 all the way through this year's. And so whatever position he took, it certainly, if he thought it would help the MLB become more relevant to younger audiences, it doesn't seem to have worked. And I don't think actually a lot of these companies are benefiting from their more woke positions or their public statements aligning with liberals on a lot of these issues, because it's just inciting a backlash among conservatives. So they're in the kind of a no-win situation, but it seems to me that they would benefit just from staying out of the political thicket.
Kim, the other challenge at some of these companies, at least, is that they face internal pressure from oftentimes progressive employees to take these stances. So the CEOs are caught between the people that they are working with every day and seeing every day and the potential of alienating consumers. But I don't know about you, it does seem to me that we maybe hit the high water mark of that a year or two ago. There's been some recent news coverage. So this is a Journal news story. Companies that embrace social issues have second thoughts. And so we'll give you the last word. I'm certain that this kind of thing is not going to go away anytime soon. And even at companies where they are stepping back from politics, there are probably still those internal groups pressuring the CEOs to do them. But maybe there have been some lessons learned in recent years, not only by Major League Baseball and Coca-Cola and Delta Airlines, but Bud Light.
I was just going to say, 2 words, Bud Light. And whether it's an employee making a poor decision, in that case with a marketing campaign, trying to cater to social issues. You can look at Target, for instance, and the backlash it has faced as well over its decision to jump into the LGBTQ arena. I think there's a couple of things happening here. One is that CEOs are remembering, again, the number one rule, that their job is to make good products, make good profits, deliver things that their customers want to buy. And that when you wade into these social issues, it is almost guaranteed that you are going to offend one half of the country or the other. And in fact, once you step a toe in trying to then extract it, becomes even harder. And I think what they've also learned is that the cost of initially caving to these outside targeted activist movements against them, which is really what happened in the case of Delta and Coca-Cola in particular and MLB, is that the companies at least weren't saying anything in the beginning, right call, and then got targeted by a number of activist groups who called them out and began campaigns against them. And as a result, they felt the need that they had to bow to that. So whether it's pressure from outside activist groups or pressure internally from certain subsets of employees, it's been a hard lesson to learn. And there are still too many companies that are doing it. You know, whether it's sometimes it's cultural issues, sometimes it's economic issues, but ones that are driven by left-wing agendas, for instance, the climate agenda. And you've seen that, for instance, in Larry Fink and BlackRock and different outfits, for instance, that have also tried to get out of fossil fuels. There are real problems with the bottom line, real problems with trying to get your business right after you do that. So I'm all for and in favor of companies just making something that people actually really want to drink or buy or shop at.
Thank you, Kim and Alicia. Thank you all for listening. You can email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button, and we'll be back tomorrow with another edition of Potomac Watch.